Good
So
afternoon.
Fantastic.
excellent, excellent. And I want this to be an interactive session because this is all about you. And I really want you guys to kind of go over exactly what you're looking for and, the objective of this meeting, right? What information would you like to have at the end? But just to introduce myself, my name obviously is Gregory Anderson. I'm the broker owner of A.C.B. Realty. Incorporated. We were founded in 2010. We have an office at 40 Pearl Street in Braintree, another office at 34 Wyman Street in Stoughton. We help first-time home buyers, renters. We do sales, rentals, pretty much commercial, and we try to be your realtors for life. And I've been doing this for a long time. And now I'll let you guys kind of go around. Obviously, I just introduced myself, and if you don't mind, just saying your name and what's your objective and what are you looking for out of this presentation.
I'll go first. My name's
Well,
Linda, and just looking for anything that I don't know about renting already.
Okay.
My name is Marsha. I'm same with Amanda. And
Okay.
Hi, my name is Nick,
Excellent.
and I'm a new owner. Just want to be reassured that I made the right choice going from renter to owner.
That's always a good choice, Nick. Trust me, always a good choice. Okay. And I think that covers everyone. Am I right with that one?
yeah, seems like it.
Okay. All right. All right. So, um, give me one second, you guys. All right. So obviously renting in Massachusetts. So we kind of talked about that. What's your name? What brought you here today? What do you hope to learn? Have someone else coming in, and we're gonna jump right into it. Okay. All right. So obviously, now renting in Massachusetts, you guys, is very expensive, right?
oh
Average
Lord.
two-bedroom rent is $2,500 to $3,500 a month. And a lot
Mm-mm.
of these landlords, they look for, strong credit history, right? So anything above 700, 675, 680 is a pretty good score. Now, it's tough because a lot of you guys probably haven't built your credit history yet. So, part of this program or part of this presentation is to, again, go over everything. And number one is to describe the importance of having good credit history. Good credit history is very, very important for so many things. I know you've heard this before, but it's really imperative that you keep a good credit score. And the ways to keep a good credit score, and I'm not a credit expert by any means. So this is just, and again, this is not legal advice. This is just educational purposes only. But the way to keep a really good credit score is you want to have at least a minimum of three credit lines. And you want to keep your balances under 25%, meaning that if you get a credit card and it is $1,000 limit, you want to keep that at least 250. And that's number one, is to keep your balance. So your ratios, right? You want to keep them 25% or lower. And the other thing is obviously paying on time. What I do suggest to a lot of my clients is to set up auto pay. So therefore, if anything ever happens or you totally forget because life happens, right? You want to make sure that your minimum payment is at least being paid on time. So that's very, very important. And a lot of things people do is they'll turn off a credit card. That's a no-no. You want to keep a lengthy history. So if you're not using a card, and some of these credit cards, they'll turn off if you don't use them within 6 months or so. So you want to make a small purchase just to kind of keep the card active. All right, so those three things. They look for payments on time, 25% usage or less, and the longer the history, the better. So keeping your credit score is very, very imperative because that shows to a landlord, hey, they pay their bills on time. If they pay their bills on time, most likely they'll pay their rent on time. And landlords are so tough in Massachusetts because it's such a legal process to get the tenant out. And we're going to go into that. And most of the times, in order to income qualify, you have to make at least two and a half, three times the rent. And they go by gross. So obviously, if the rent is, $2,000 or something, they want to see you make at least 5,000, $5,000 to $6,000. So that's kind of like the minimum
Mm.
of to qualify for credit versus and also income. And again, as we know, rents in Boston are extremely, extremely expensive. All right, I'll jump to the next one. And if you have any questions or anything like that, definitely feel free to share them and then we can go from there. Okay, so again, those requirements kind of put people in, it gets you worried about, am I going to be able to rent my first apartment? Because again, rents are so expensive, I don't have enough built up credit history. And some landlords, they do accept co-signers, but not everyone accepts a cosigner because a cosigner is going to be ultimately responsible. And it all depends on whether it's a private landlord versus an apartment complex, because they all have the private landlords, they have more discretion in regards to accepting cosigners versus the apartment complexes. And again, if they give you a 14-day notice for non-payment of rent, they have to give that cosigner. What if the cosigner's in another country, right? So logistically it becomes a little difficult. So just keep that in mind. Certain properties have different rules. And again, some co-signers are accepted, some are not. Okay, so application checklist. Most of the times when you're filling out an application, you have a photo ID. Obviously, when you fill out an application, you have to put in your social security number. Be careful with this because you're not supposed to email your social security numbers using Gmail and things of that nature, right? Because that's not safe. It's not an encrypted email. So do be careful when you fill out applications and you're just sending your social security and all your sensitive information without any type of encryption. Okay. And we talked about the credit score. The higher, the better. That just shows that you're more of a reliable renter, and that's in their eyes. And I don't want you to, if your credit score is not where you want it to be, that doesn't change who you are as a person. It's just something you have to work on. And a lot of the times, if you do have a score that's not so great, when you submit your application, put a cover letter. Treat it as if you're, applying for a job. Put a cover letter. Say, hey, landlord, I know my credit score is not great. Here are some reasons it's not established because credit that's not established is more acceptable than credit that has been established, but you basically ruined your credit. So you want to put a little cover letter together just to let the landlord know who you are as a person because they're going to be reviewing multiple applications and they don't have the chance to speak with you and to see that, you're a good person. You will take care of the property. You're reliable, you're clean, you have great habits. So you want to put those things into your cover letter with your application packet. And it also shows the effort. So that's another way to find a great apartment. Landlord references, that obviously applies, right? So you definitely never want to burn any bridges because your references will come up. And if you don't have any references, if this is your first time renting, again, a cover letter, or you can also put your employer as a reference, just someone who's credible, right? Not your friend or anything like that. I mean, if it's a great friend and they are in a nice high position, or you know who to put for a reference, my point is. A lot of people, they'll do background and credit checks, no eviction history. And then let's go into the security deposit. So most of the times in Massachusetts, they'll require first, last month security deposit, lock and change fee. Locked basically for the locks, right? The cost to change the locks. Now, one important thing with a security deposit is that a security deposit cannot exceed 1 month's rent when it comes to residential. If it is a commercial property, then they can charge as much security deposit as they would like. However, with residential, it cannot exceed 1 month's rent. And there are strict laws in Massachusetts with the security deposit. The security deposit has to go into an escrow account. It goes into an escrow account on the assumption that that is your money, right? It's not the landlord's money. So they want it in a separate account in case the landlord becomes insolvent and creditors go after the landlord because technically that is not the landlord's money. And it's supposed to accrue interest, and you get your interest on a yearly basis or a statement thereof. And also with the security deposit, there's an apartment condition statement. Whenever you pay a security deposit, there should be a statement that comes along with it stating the condition of the property. So it's been recently painted, there's no holes in the walls, floors are in great condition. I see a question here. Feel free to like unmute yourself and
Yes, thank you. I just have a question on what you just said about the security deposit.
Hmm.
I know when we just rent the apartment, you have the security deposit. If you're in a situation where the original contract had the security deposit, and then the um, some landlords don't renew the contract, they just let you live there without a contract. Um, so it becomes like, they're not, there's no contract. So if like, say years later, you want to recoup that security deposit and there's no contract, um, are they under any legal obligation to give you that security deposit since our contract is obsolete and invalid at that point?
Yes. So basically, you initially start off with a 1 year. Most landlords, they start off with a 1 year lease. And by the way, you can have a 2 year lease, a 3 year lease, a 6 month lease, any type of term you want. But after the lease terminates, or shall we say that after the lease ends, it usually becomes month to month at that point, and they call it a tenancy at will. So basically, you have to give the landlord 30-day notice if you want to vacate. The landlord gives you 30-day notice if they want you to vacate. So after the year, it becomes tenancy at will. So it's still a rental agreement. It's just month to month. In regard to the security deposit, yes, as long as you're in that property, the security deposit is supposed to remain in that escrow account. Now, in reference to the landlord giving you the security deposit back, after you vacate the property, the landlord has 30 days to return that security deposit back to you. Now, if there's any damage or unpaid rent or anything of that nature, the landlord will provide you a statement with any, basically the estimated cost of any damage. And back before I even get into that, remember we were talking about the apartment condition statement when you pay the security deposit. That apartment condition statement says that it's written by the landlord or the landlord's agent, stating the condition of the property before you moved in. After you move in, you have 15 days to go through the property and list any damage or any imperfection that you do not want to be responsible for. Because after all, that is your security deposit for any non-wear and tear damage or non-payment of rent. So you go through it, you list any damage that's not your responsibility. I suggest you take a timestamp photo, and you return that security deposit, you return that apartment condition statement to the landlord, and you retain a copy of it. So therefore, when it's time for you to leave, there's no hearsay about what damage was already present versus the damage you caused. It's very clear. And again, the landlord has 30 days to return that security deposit to you. If there's any type of damage that you have caused, they will give you an estimated amount of what that security deposit will be deducted, which amount will be deducted from the security deposit. That's why you always provide a forward and address. So those are the rules of the security deposit, and the landlord cannot really commingle that, or not even, let me rephrase, the landlord cannot commingle that with their personal funds because there is the law of treble damages in Massachusetts, where the tenant is entitled to 3 times the security deposit if it's not held in the proper escrow account. Okay, so Massachusetts is very strict with security deposits, and that is your pretty much your rundown of security deposits right there. Okay. Again, credit score, super important, and not just for apartments, for everything, you guys. Because eventually, when you're renting an apartment home, this is just your beginning. You're going to rent, the cycle goes, you rent an apartment, then you get a little condo if you're a busy professional. You don't want to deal with any yard maintenance or anything like that. And when you have a high credit score, you have favorable lending terms because you're put in a less risk category. So you get better interest rates and you have better programs available. For example, you can get a conventional program to purchase a home with only 3% down, and it's a conventional program different from an FHA, where basically your mortgage insurance premium and the whole appraisal process, we're going to get into all of that, but maintain a really good credit score. That's the whole point of this. Again, we went over the three main things to achieve a good credit score. So keep that in mind. It's very, very important. So, we talked about the 3 times your the rent rule, and this is important for not just for the landlord, for you. It's for you as well, because if your rent to income ratio is 50%. Basically, let's say your rent is $4,000, excuse me, $2,000. You make 4,000 a month, and 50% of that goes to rent. All you need is one little mishap to be behind. So you always want to give yourself enough breathing room for anything that comes your way, right? That could be a car, right? Could be some medical expense. It could be anything. You know how life is. There's 1,001 things that can happen that requires expenses. And we don't have a crystal ball. We all wish we did, right? But again, things happen. So you always want to make sure you do have that buffer. And get roommates if you can. It's only temporary. And your whole goal is not to rent forever. The whole goal is to purchase your home. Because when you purchase your home, you immediately start building equity. You can write off your mortgage insurance payment, right? You can write off, there's so many things you can write off your expenses as a homeowner. So your goal is to purchase a home. So if you can, in a short term, remember it's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. So if you can do a couple of roommates, people you trust, people that are reliable, right? Don't just roommate with anyone, but people that are reliable, be roommates. Because if you can afford the rent, great. But if you can get a roommate and save an extra $500 a month, now you're talking because you're going to be closer to that goal of purchasing your first home. Again, the guarantor, if you don't have the great credit history, or if the income is lacking, it all depends on the landlord and the property management company, what they accept. Because if you're in school full time, your parents are going to pay the rent, then obviously the guarantor, that helps, right? But keep in mind the guarantor kind of has to go through the same process as yourself. Okay. And the largest security deposit, this means if they were asking for a half a month security, you would pay the full month security. So again, back to what I said about the security deposit. If it's a residential property, the security deposit cannot exceed 1 month's rent. Another way to help with your application process, if let's say you're working part-time or anything of that nature, you can show that you have substantial savings and you have liquid assets. Just because the landlord wants to make sure they get their money. So whatever you can do to bridge that gap, you do that. Okay. Again, roommates is a great great way to do that. Now, source of income. So, in Massachusetts, it is illegal for landlords to discriminate against Section 8, MRVP, SSDI, or other assistance programs. Again, and this is for legal forms of income. Query checks. So landlords can't automatically reject you for a criminal record. They must do individualized assessments, meaning that they can't say anyone with a criminal record does not get into this property. Because now that's desperate treatment, right? That's desperate impact. You're basically affecting a certain group of people. So it has to be on a case-by-case basis. And if you are denied, this is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If you are denied based on credit report, you must receive notice and can dispute any inaccuracies for free. So whatever report that they pulled, you can ask for a copy of it because you want to make sure whatever's on that report is accurate. And by the way, you are entitled to one free credit report a year from annual credit report. You are entitled to one free report. So back to the credit, it is more important than having money without any source of where that money came from. Because nowadays, if you're buying a home, for example, and you put more than $2,000 into your account, that's going to be a problem for the bank because it needs to be sourced. They need to know where that money's coming from. Is that from a gift? Is that whatever the money is from? It needs to be sourced. And now you got to wait 30 days, right? Some banks require you to wait 60 days. So 2 cycles or 1 cycle. So again, having very good credit is beyond important. All right, so we talked about tenant laws. Now, let's talk about the whole eviction process in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is a very tough state in reference to evictions. A landlord cannot just throw you out, right? It's very, very important. So if you miss your rent, the first thing a landlord's going to give you is a 14-day notice for non-payment of rent. And in regards to that 14-day notice, there's a form on the Massachusetts website that gives information about raft. So it's 11 pages that needs to be accompanied with the notice to quit, which is the 14-day notice for non-payment of rent. And the notice is going to differ versus if you are a tenancy at will or under a lease. Now, let's say, you don't pay your rent or whatever the case may be. Now the landlord's going to go to step two, which is the summons process. And they're going to go to court, pay for the summons, and you're going to have to go to court. And basically, they'll try to go through a mediation or whatever the case may be. And if that does not work, the next one is the execution, which basically means the landlord will hire a constable or a sheriff. They'll put a notice on your door. Usually it's a 48-hour notice, and that's going to be, business days and things of that nature. It's a 48-hour notice that they're going to be there with a move-in truck to move your items out of there and to move you out of there if need be. And the landlord is required to store your items for up to 3 months. So it's very difficult in Massachusetts to get an apartment because a lot of these landlords, they don't want to go through this. This is very expensive for them. This could take months, much less attorney fees, the time, the effort, the turmoil. So they want to make sure whichever tenants that they get, that they're not going to go through this process because, again, it's a lengthy process to get people out. It's very different from certain states. Certain states, you don't pay your rent, and guess what? They just give you notice, and your stuff is literally right outside on the sidewalk. New Hampshire, Florida, those are all different states here that kind of do this. It's very different. So this is another reason why landlords are very particular on who they get as a tenant because it's easy to get the tenant in there, but it's very difficult to get them out, especially with the legal process, because only a judge can evict. Um, Only a judge, right? It has to be a court order. And again, that document is called the execution, which will be delivered by the constable, taped to your door, that they will be there within 48 hours with the moving truck to move your items out. And that goes on your record. So, which becomes public records, which also makes it very difficult to rent another apartment going forward. I know there are some circumstances where things can be expunged, but for the most part, if you don't pay your rent and it is at fault execution, then that's going to go on your record. And that will make things very difficult for you with getting another place to live. So you don't want to go down that path. Okay. So Raft. So Raft is an emergency program up to $7,000 for rent. It covers the moving cost. You go on, everything is done through their website. This is if you need assistance with moving in. You're in a situation where you just don't have the upfront moving cost. You can apply for Raft, if you qualify. Now, and this one talks about obviously mobile vouchers versus project-based vouchers. Basically, project-based vouchers is just the vouchers tied to the unit. The mobile vouchers tied to the person where they can go anywhere and rent an apartment, right? And the vouchers, the wait list it's extremely long. And again, this helps with, obviously covering the portion of there. So if you have a voucher, you pay 30% of your income, and then the housing authority, whoever it is, whether it's BHA, Metro, SMOC, I mean, you name it, they would cover the rest of the rent. And going through and talking more about vouchers, because it's a big part of rentals that a lot of people do have vouchers, and there for some reason there's a stigma, and that it should not be that way because we all run into issues where we need assistance, especially HUD-VASH. HUD-VASH is the voucher for veterans, right? Our veterans, they protect us, they serve for us, they come back, and some of them have, PTSD, or they have other things going on, and or they get injured, right? And they can't make a living, so they get that voucher to help them. So, or it could be a single mom with, several children, and her entire job was taking care of the household, and things just happen where her husband's not around anymore, or her partner, or whatever. So, it's you never, never, this is why you should never judge or discriminate or anything like that. And it's actually illegal to do that. So enough about that. We'll jump onto that. So we talked about the RAF, we talked about the Section 8. So the difference is now with private landlords or corporations, those big apartment complexes, there's quite substantial differences. With the private landlords, they're more flexible income on credit, dependent on the situation, right? Again, we talked about how most landlords do want good credit because it shows that you do pay things on time. And, another thing that private landlords, they're negotiable with terms, direct communication. You're speaking with the landlord versus the corporation. So you could understand the difference in regards to the atmosphere. The inconsistent maintenance, it all depends on the landlord. You do have some slumlords, and I'm a landlord myself, right? I have quite a few units myself. So I'm very particular on making sure my units are cleaned on a bi-weekly basis. If there's any issue at all, it gets resolved within 24 to 48 hours. Like I'm very strict. But at the same time, on the first, in my Venmos, my Cash Apps, my rent drop boxes. Each tenant's different, so I set it up based on what they're comfortable with. I get my rent paid on the second, the latest. And if it's not there, I call them like, "Hey, what's going on?" And if you do become a landlord, you want to create that type of environment. You want to make sure it's safe, it's clean, it's well taken care of. You treat your tenants the way you want to be treated because that's the golden rule in life. It's very cliche, but it applies to everything. You keep it clean. If there's a problem, you have it fixed right away. And if you're so therefore, when you ask for your rent, they actually want to pay you your rent, right? And sometimes I'll get a late payment and I'll say, well, next time, please let me know. Like I should not be asking you why you haven't paid your rent. Is there a problem? Is what's going on? So you definitely want to make sure you set the precedence right away if you are a landlord in regards to keeping the property clean, all maintenance items are taken care of right away, and that if the rent is late, you need to know why and they need to communicate with you. Because again, you want to keep a nice clean ship here. Now, the corporations obviously is professionally managed. They have maintenance. It all depends, right? If you pay for a luxury building, you're going to have more perks. Amenities, gym, pool, all that stuff is very expensive. And the thing about these corporates, they'll offer you a month free, 2 months free, but every year you get in there, the rents are going up substantially, right? Because they're doing market assessments of what, apartments are going for. And you go in and oh, this is a great deal. I saved 2 months. They prorated throughout the term of my lease. So my rent's really great. But the next year you're hit with a $200-300 rent increase. So it all depends on what you want and what your time frame is too. When your time frame is very important. Do you plan on only being in the area for a certain amount of time, or is it short term, long term? What are you trying to do? So obviously they have a legal team and things of that nature. So, it's higher cost. So there's quite a difference in regards to renting privately owned versus corporate. Okay. And then that choice is totally up to you. All right. So living in your rental. So warranty of habitability. So basically your house must be clean, must be safe, and temperature for if the landlord provides heat for you, um, it has to be 68 degrees, and that is from May 15th through the end of September. And work in utilities. That's if the landlord pays for the utilities. Now, if you pay for your own utilities, you want to make sure that that everything is in working order. Because let's say your heat stopped working, right? The heat is like one of the biggest violations. You can actually withhold rent, but there's a certain way to do that. And again, I'm not an attorney. So again, this is just for educational purposes only. You want to make sure you put that in an escrow account, right? You want to document everything. If it's not working, you want to send the landlord a written notice saying, "Hey, my heat's not working. I've notified you about it," etc. Because at the end of the day, they have to provide a clean. You're in a contract with them. You're paying them rent, so you have the license to lease the property, in sort of speak. and they have the right to provide a property in good habitability condition, right? So that's kind of the trade-off. They provide you a good property, you pay your rent. If they violate, then obviously you have your rights as well. We talked about the statement of condition with the security deposit. Provide 15 days. You have that time to kind of go through the property here and list any damage, so you're not held responsible for that. We talked about a fixed term lease. A fixed term lease could be 8 months. It doesn't necessarily mean 12 months. A fixed term lease could be 24 months, 36 months. And then after that, usually there is a time where you have to give notice whether you want to continue as tenancy at will or renew it for another fixed term. And sometimes they'll have a lot of our leases we will do is self-extending. And a self-extending lease just basically means that it renews to become another fixed term. And there's a period where the landlord must notify you of any rent increases or any changes during the term of a lease. And if you're living at a property and the property is sold to another owner, then, and if you're under a lease, you are in good hands because you're under a lease. You're not a tenancy at will. Whoever's buying that property has to accept the lease terms that are currently in place. Also, with the last month's rent, that needs to be transferred over to the new landlord plus a security deposit. But if you're month to month and the property you're living in is being sold, the landlord can give you a 30-day notice. Or if you move, if the new owner owns a property, they can give you a 30-day notice. So fixed term lease means stability. At will, if you get a 30-day notice, they kind of have to go through the process with the eviction process if you don't leave, which is a summons and the execution, etc. So you still have the right to your property, to your apartment, but again, with the short term, with the month to month, it's less stable than the fixed term. Okay. So let's talk about the financial reality. So you're renting a place or you're owning, right? When you're renting, 100% goes to the landlord. No equity is built up. Rent increases yearly most of the time, right? No wealth accumulation because, as you know, with rents, you have your pity. When the landlord owns a property, he has pity. Principal, interest, tax, and insurance. Also, let's not forget the utilities with the water cost, things of that nature. And if you're renting a property and it's the water's not separately metered, the landlord has to pay for the water. Okay, so that's super important to kind of keep that one. Now, let's say you're owning. When you own a property, you immediately start to build equity. Your fixed payments, most of the times it's a 360-month payment equals 30 years. Your principal and interest stays the same. The only thing that may adjust throughout the term is basically your property taxes and your insurance. And if it's a condo, you will pay your condo fees covers basically your external insurance, but most of the times they'll like you to get a walls in policy, which is called a HO6 policy, which is very inexpensive compared to traditional hazard insurance. And obviously, we talked about the tax benefits. So when you're renting, you're literally burning money, right? But when you have a home, every single year you enjoy that appreciation because you can't duplicate land, right? And that's why having a home is such a great asset because you can't duplicate land. And through inflation, that's why homes are a lot more expensive now than they were. Obviously, because of the time value of money, but mainly inflation, because there's more and more money going into the economy, and that money has to go somewhere. Hence the reason of the price of an ounce of gold right now, right? It's over $4,000. The price of a home. Years and years ago, it was, God, a single home in Massachusetts, probably 300, 400,000. Now, a really nice home's going to go to 8, 900, depending on the location, obviously, and condition, things of that nature. Because there's only so many homes and more money keeps going into the economy and into the market. So that money needs to go somewhere. And since the homes are, yes, people are building, but you can't duplicate it, right? So it has to go into something. So That's why home prices are so expensive because, again, inflation, more money coming in, and the the value, well, the shall I say, you can't duplicate homes, so it's constant, right? So very important. All right, so breaking down the numbers, let's say a condo 500K with 5% down, monthly, 3,300, that's your mortgage and taxes. And again, it all depends on your interest rates, right? Right now, we're in a kind of a high interest market versus pre-COVID where things were, 2.5, 3%. People are loving it. That's why you're not having a lot of sellers sell their property because if they sell their property, yes, they can enjoy the appreciation. But at the same token, they're also going to be buying high and they give away that 3% interest rate that they're paying, which is gold, right? You're not going to see that for years. So after 5 years, you have over $50,000 in equity from payments. You have a property appreciation, so 80K in value. So your total wealth is 130K versus you paying rent for the 5 years, which it basically, like we said, you're burning your money. So if you can save as much as you can, and this, if you can stay at home with your parents too, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this. They want to be out on their own and you know, they want to venture out, right? Live with roommates is fine, but make sure you got the right roommates, right? Make sure it's not everyone's responsible. But if you can stay home and save as much as you can while building your skills, whether that's through education, your um, whatever profession you're getting in, just to kind of work on yourself. Because remember, you want to get to a point where when you're in your 30s, 40s, whatever the case may be, you want to get to a point where you are very well off. So it's going to require some sacrifice in the beginning. And that includes, again, keeping your credit very good, saving as much as you can, and just thinking about the long term, because that is the fastest and one of the most proven ways to build generational wealth, right? You want to create a legacy for yourself, your family, whoever you want to create something. You want to make sure that your existence is not being a waste of time. And I mean that in the nicest way, obviously. Okay. So, let's talk about different types of payments here, right? So you don't need 20% down to buy a house. As I hinted earlier, with a really good credit score, you can even buy a house with 3% down. So an LTV of 97%, LTV loan to value ratio. FHA, that's one of the easiest loans to get into. Now, FHA is 3.5% down, and FHA is kind of the one of the really good first-time home buyers because not only does it require a low down payment, but it's more lenient on credit scores. Like you can have a 580. I'd suggest you don't have a 580 because then obviously you'll get favorable terms when the higher your score is. But you can have a lower credit score and get into a home. And at the same time, they allow a higher payment threshold, meaning they allow more of your income to go towards your monthly expenses for your home versus conventional. So it's one of the best products to kind of get into a home if things are not so great, right? If things aren't perfect. Mass housing can allows you up to $25,000 for assistance for the down payment assistance program. We actually run quite a few ads for our. So you have a question there? Yep.
Yeah, before you move on with the FHA,
Hmm.
I understand it's a great option if, especially if your income is not very high or if your credit score is not very high. But the only problem is, I know you spoke about the value of the homes, because of the inflation, the value of the homes are getting so high, it becomes almost impossible to find a home that FHA is going to pay for because of the limit that they set on those on on the price of the homes. So it's great to have the FHA, but good luck finding a home in Massachusetts, especially in the Middlesex area that is good because FHA is not going to pay for any price of the home. So I find that out the hard way. I just wanted to, drop that in there. Um, because I think a lot of people don't realize it until you're actually looking for a home. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a point, right? But for Middlesex County, FHA limit is 914,000 and two 914 to 250, right, for a single family. So if your house is under $900,000, so the limits are up there. For two family, it's 1.4 million, and for three units, it's 1.78. Right. So the limits are pretty high in regards to, and the only other thing with FHA, it's not the perfect program, but again, it works for a lot of people because of it gives you that higher payment threshold in addition to the lower credit score requirement. The only thing is you do have that mortgage insurance premium for the life of the loan, right? So you pay that up front. And the only way to get rid of that is to refinance to a conventional because it stays with the exact loan, right? So that's another downfall with FHA. But again, it's one of those programs that if you're not so perfect, it's kind of great to get in. And the other thing with FHA is the appraisal. The appraisal is a little more strict because it's a government-backed loan, right? So the FHA appraisal is a little stricter versus a conventional, meaning that you can't, they look for a lot of safety items. You can't have any peel and paint, any broken windows, big holes in the walls, all utilities have to work. The house has to be livable, more than livable, in really decent condition, or it's going to be flagged by FHA to have those things repaired. So sometimes you'll see a listing and an agent say, it may not be FHA approved because, the side of the home may have a bunch of peel and paint and things of that nature. What we would do in a situation like that, representing a buyer, is I've done this multiple times that, we'll cover certain items that comes up on the appraisal, or sometimes we'll just be proactive and get it done ahead of time if the offers, because an agent likes that. The listing agent wants to make sure that the deal goes through for their seller because the seller is dependent on them to make sure they get to the finish table. So if I'm working with a buyer and they have an FHA loan and they have a home that needs a little bit of work for it to pass the FHA appraisal, and they're okay with spending the money up front. And I always put a threshold on it. We have contractors will say, hey, this offer will take care of the repairs up to XYZ. And that usually gives some type of reassurance for the listing agent, like, okay, well, I know they're going to take care of it. And we usually like to do it ahead of time before the appraiser gets there because it'll be another cost for the appraiser to come back. And especially FHA appraisers, they're very strict. But back to the Middlesex, it's right now, it is 914,250. So the loan limits are
I,
pretty
I,
decent.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. I meant to say outside of Middlesex. Um, if you're going outside of Middlesex where the homes are much cheaper, um, then it would be very hard.
Like what
Because
location are
out
you thinking?
like right now I'm in Central Mass, and um, the homes are still expensive in Central Mass, but because it's not in Middlesex, um, they're very strict. They're not gonna pay for because the county that they rep because Central Mass is not in Middlesex, and the
Hmm.
homes are almost as expensive as the homes that are in Middlesex. So that's where it becomes a little
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah. Middlesex right now, they have it as 524,000. So, um, but again, if you are And usually this is meant for like your beginning home, right? Most people who use FHA loans, it's kind of a thing where it helps you to get on your feet, right? Because you're putting 3.5% down. Usually when you are buying an upper home, and this is why it's so important, it kind of ties back into what we are talking about, the appreciation. So if you're buying your second home, you have most likely built up a good amount of equity, right? So now you can use that equity where you can put a lot more than 3.5% down and use a conventional loan to buy that second home. But for a modest home in For example, Worcester, right? You're looking at Worcester County. It's again, it's 524. You can buy a pretty decent starter home for $500,000 in Worcester, depending on what you want. But my point is, you start off with that, you build some equity, and then you get your bigger home down the line, and you keep going and keep going. And that's the thing with real estate. It's all a cycle. You start
Yeah.
with your apartment, you get another, your first little condo, then your next house, you have a family, right? You kind of want more rooms, more bathrooms. You get this big house. All the kids, they're now starting where you started off. They're looking for apartments with roommates or their own place or their own condo. They get their own families, and now you're in this huge home, 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. It's too much to clean. You and your partner, it's like, all right, we got to downsize. So it's kind of like it's almost like a circle, you know? So,
Thank you for
um,
the information because it looks like it went up since a couple years ago. Looks like. Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. So there's a lot of different programs, you guys. They have the mass housing that can help you as well. They do require you to have, pretty good credit history. That's a requirement for mass housing. So this is why throughout this whole presentation, I've been kind of talking about credit because that'll allow you to get into like the better first-time home programs because they want to make sure you pay your rent on time, to pay your mortgage on time, right? They have local first-time home buyer programs. They have the Boston cold purchasing pilot program. So there's a lot of programs out there to help you get into a home. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So, so again, back to it. Every rent payment enriches your landlord's family. Every mortgage payment builds your family's future, right? Building generational wealth. This is what this is about. This is about you building generational wealth. And the barrier isn't monthly affordability, right? It's a down payment. But again, we just went over so many programs that can help you with the down payment. Okay. And again, it's for you, your family. You're creating a legacy. All right. So what do? Check, improve your credit score. Aim for 700 plus. And careful with co-signing for others. And, you know, I'm not saying you can't help people, but just keep in mind that, oh, another thing which you can do too. Let's say you don't have great credit and your parents do. You can have them put you on their credit, which will help build your score. But again, just keep in mind if you do something that affects their score, right? So that's something you can do as well. Just think about. So start saving aggressively. Remember, this is for long term, right? And research first-time home buyer programs. It's all of the stuff is out there. It's all online. There's plenty of first-time home buyer programs. We work with a really great lender that we help a lot of people. Right now, we're working with like 3 clients that are using the down payment assistance programs. So it's definitely out there. And yeah, so you have your homework of what to do. And, there's my contact information here. And, if you guys have any questions, I'll be more than happy to assist with them. You guys still there? Did I talk you to death?
Thanks for the call, Greg. Really appreciate it. Learned a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, we're still here.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions about anything at all, especially with the whole rental realm? And again, I want you to become future homeowners. I don't want you to rent forever.
Yeah. So if you want to buy a house like now, um, or in the near future, like what's the amount of money like for like for a starter house?
Sure. I mean, that all depends on, what location you're looking for. Um,
Yes, I know, but is there a range? Yeah.
I mean, I would say most starter homes are starting at around, 450 to 600. And again, it just depends on the location. Location is a huge factor.
Yeah.
And then you want to always budget at least. Most people say you can do 3% down, but you have to remember when you're buying a home, it comes with 2 portions. It comes with your down payment, which you can
Mm-hmm.
get programs to help you for, but you also
Mm-hmm.
have closing costs. And I always say budget 2% of the home's price for closing cost. And, most important is that you do want to have rainy day money because owning a
Yes.
home, something could go wrong, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to basically, and by the way, while we're talking about going home, as of tomorrow, there's a new law being passed in Massachusetts. And one second there. There's a new law being passed in Massachusetts, and that new law is basically that as of tomorrow, the 16th, a seller cannot accept an offer with a waived home inspection. Now, you can not do the home inspection after the
Mm-hmm.
offer is accepted, but again, a seller cannot accept that. So that kind of evens the playing field. And while we're talking about laws, as of August 1st in Massachusetts, when you're renting an apartment and or you want to rent an apartment and it's being offered by the landlord's agent, that landlord's agent cannot charge you a broker fee because the landlord is required to pay the fee. Now, if you independently hire an agent to help you find an apartment, that's different. But
Okay.
there's no dual agency, meaning that the agent is charging the landlord and charging you. So on your, apartment home searches, that's a great tool to know, and that has been in effect since August 1st. That again, if an apartment is being represented by an agent from a landlord, they cannot charge you a broker's fee. And the most you should be paying is the first last security, the security deposit being no more than 1 month's rent, and they can charge you the lock and change fee.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank
Mhm.
so in terms of the interest rate, I know we probably don't have any idea, but it's high now. Do you like based on historical, like in the history, do you like have any idea when the interest rate will come down, if ever?
Well, I mean, that's people want the rates to come down. The interest rates are going to come down hopefully when inflation gets to the targeted Fed 2%. Because again, we have high interest because of due to a lot of influx of funds into the market to stimulate the market, right? Because of COVID. So if you have a bunch of money coming into the market, things become more expensive. And now
Mm-hmm.
they're just making it more difficult to take out mortgages, take out loans, making it a higher payment. And another thing too, that interest rates are really going to tie to your 10-year treasuries, right? That the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
government issues. So those two things are kind of the main players. So I don't see interest rates coming down to 3%, in any time at all. Right now, just looking at a quick snapshot because the interest rates change every day. So
Yes.
right now they're at about 6.31%, and that's with the 30-year fixed.
And that's like almost double from pre-COVID, right?
Correct. Yep.
Oh, child.
And
Oh.
that's what contributes to the housing shortage because a lot of the people who have purchased, several years ago, they don't want to give up their 3% interest for
But
a 6%.
yeah, that totally makes sense. And I'm the type that, honestly, if I'm gonna buy like a home, like I would rather like a new home. So I know my
Hmm.
chest is high. I just don't want any old house personally. So I know that's gonna be more like expensive.
Yeah, and w when you're looking for a home, just keep in mind that it's, look beyond the cosmetics. Look beyond the
Yeah.
cosmetics. Just focus on the location and focus on the home
Um,
itself and the bones and, the room. Does it have potential? Because I can guarantee you there's a lot of these homes that you go and you say,
mm-hmm.
wow, it looks great. Most of the times, it probably never looked that way, right? When you own a home,
Yes.
your job is every year do a new project, you're creating your equity. You're building on top of your equity. So
Yes.
don't just look for the new kitchens, the new bathrooms. Just look for,
Yes.
okay, is the space functional? Is it
Yes.
livable? Is it in a nice area that I want that's
Yes.
accessible to all the things that I need to be close to? Once you
Yeah.
just focus on those things,
Yeah.
don't worry about the cosmetics. I mean, obviously,
Yes.
a new roof, new heating system, new
Mm-hmm.
electrical
Yes.
foundation, all the expensive items, yes, that's an issue because it's expensive. But if you're worried
Mm-hmm.
about a new kitchen, new bathroom, um,
Yes.
don't worry about that. And like I
Yes.
always say, a can of paint is like a can of gold. So just look beyond the new stuff. Just look for the other things, okay?
Okay. All right. That's good advice.
All
Thank
right.
you.
My pleasure. Was there another question, you guys?
Yeah, so I have two more questions.
Hmm.
One is for you, and the other one might not be for you, but I'm gonna ask the one that's for you first. So would you recommend anybody right now um, who doesn't have a great um, landlord? They don't renew the lease because they don't want to fix anything in the house, and they're not very good at responding, and um, it's not great. You don't have a great relationship with them. Would you recommend anybody to look for another apartment in this um, economy? Right now, I know it's currently very hard to find a place. What's your take on this one? Or would you, recommend someone to just write it out for now, if your plan is to move out and purchase your home eventually?
Well, I mean, it all depends on, is it something the landlord's supposed to fix? Have you given him written documentation or just written letters saying, hey, these are the things that I would like fixed per my lease term or per, your requirements.
What
Just
if you're not currently in a lease? Are they
it's still again, if you're not in a lease, you're still a tenant and he's still a landlord. So now you're just in a tenancy at will agreement, which is still a type of rental agreement, which is similar to a lease. The only difference is that you're month to month versus a lease has a start date and an end date.
okay?
So
So even
tenants,
if there's
mhm.
we didn't sign anything, it's still assumed that because you're living in a home that you are under some kind of agreement,
Yes, you're a tenant at will.
tenant.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because while we're on that, I had a my previous landlord. He said he was going to sell the house because we told him to fix the lead issue. It was going to cost him too much money. He told us going to sell the house, and it turns out that after we moved out, he put somebody else in who doesn't have any kids.
Yeah. So
Um,
that part I don't really, like
yeah,
I'm not an attorney. I don't give legal advice or anything of that nature.
that's just a way around getting somebody out because it's so difficult to get somebody out if they ask you to fix something. But neither here nor there. The other question that I have is, I said it's not going to be for you, but I don't see anybody from Treasury here besides the liar. But um, what is Treasury doing to help employees stay close to their jobs? Because we're finding more and more that employees can't afford to live where they work. Some of them have to move very far away to Rhode Island, um, even farther. Um, I don't know if Treasury knows that this is an issue, or would they just is there something that employees can access right now in terms of opportunities and assistance?
I can definitely reach out to the HR team about that and sort of look into it a bit more. But Nick, I'll definitely message you after this session about that. I'll try to figure something out for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
That's all I have for today. Thank you.
I appreciate your questions. You definitely kept it going. I do like the interaction. So thank you so much for that. So did you any other questions for me, you guys? And I do have a book. I will get your contact information and then I can send you a book about first-time home buying. I'll get that over to you guys. You can download it. It's a free book, and I'll make sure Delia has that and go from there. Okay. But I really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much for just participating and for listening. And hopefully I was able to bring you some value today.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Gregory. That was a great presentation. I'll go ahead and stop the recording here.